The silence in the room wasn't just an absence of sound. It was a physical thing, a heavy blanket that smothered the cheerful chatter of the family reunion just moments before. It pressed in on me, thick with the weight of dozens of pairs of eyes, all turning from my mother to me. Her voice, still ringing with a performative, jovial boom, echoed in the sudden vacuum. "I'm proud of all my children, of course. David, a senior associate at his law firm. Sarah, with her incredible surgical residency. I'm just so proud. Except for that loser, of course." She had gestured vaguely in my direction with a wine glass, a dismissive flick of her wrist that was more damning than the word itself. A few of my cousins tittered nervously. My brother David gave a tight, uncomfortable smile, while Sarah stared intently at her plate as if it held the secrets to the universe. No one defended me. No one said a word. In that moment, I wasn't a person. I was a punchline. I was the requisite shadow that made their own light seem brighter. I felt my own face become a mask, a placid, unreadable surface. I didn't cry. I didn't shout. I simply folded my napkin, placed it on the table, and stood up. I walked out of the house, my childhood home, without looking back. The drive home was numb. The streetlights smeared across my windshield like watercolors. This wasn't a new pain. It was a chronic ache that had just experienced a sharp, acute flare-up. Growing up, I was the square peg they never stopped trying to hammer into a round hole. David was the scholar, the debater. Sarah was the scientist, the prodigy. They were clear, definable paths to success that my mother, a woman obsessed with the architecture of appearances, could understand and, more importantly, brag about. I was the artist. The quiet one. The one who saw the world in color and shape and story, not in titles and hierarchies. My passions were dismissed as hobbies. My choice to pursue graphic design and build my own small, online branding company from scratch was seen not as ambitious, but as a failure to launch. "When are you going to get a real job?" was the constant, weary refrain at every family dinner. What they never seemed to grasp, or perhaps chose to ignore, was that my hobby was quietly successful. While David was drowning in student debt, and Sarah was living on a resident's meager stipend, my business was thriving. I lived simply, so they assumed I was struggling. They never asked, and I never offered. I became the family's secret, silent benefactor. When the boiler broke in their aging house, a surprise inheritance from a distant aunt I'd invented covered the cost. When my father needed unexpected dental surgery, a bonus from my non-existent corporate job paid the bill. I was a ghost. In their financial machine, a convenient, invisible source of funds they felt entitled to. They took my money but denied me my dignity, a transaction they seemed perfectly comfortable with. They saw me as a loser, but a useful one. And for years, I let them. I paid this unspoken tax for the crime of not being the child they wanted, hoping that one day, my contributions would be seen, that I would be seen. That reunion, that single, careless sentence, was not an attack. It was a diagnosis. It showed me the sickness at the heart of my family with absolute clarity. And as I unlocked the door to my own quiet, peaceful apartment, the numbness finally began to recede, replaced not by rage, but by a chilling, crystalline cold. The time for being a ghost was over. The days following the reunion were a strange sort of limbo. The hurt was still there, a low hum beneath the surface, but it was being eclipsed by a powerful, new resolve. It was like watching a storm gather on a distant horizon. I didn't answer their calls. My mother's apologetic voicemails, which were really just justifications for her behavior, went unheard. My father's brief, mumbled messages asking me to just let it go for your mother's sake were deleted. I needed silence. I needed to think. I sat in my office, surrounded by the evidence of my failure, client contracts, glowing testimonials, a tax return that would make my brother's eyes water, and I finally let myself see the truth. They didn't just underestimate me, they used me. My love and my desire for their approval had been a resource they'd mined without a second thought. My generosity wasn't seen as kindness, it was seen as my duty, the penance I paid for being a disappointment. The coldness inside me wasn't anger. It was clarity. It was the sharp, clean edge of a decision being made. I thought back to my grandfather, my mother's father. He was a quiet, practical man who had seen his daughter's obsession with status for what it was. Years ago, before he passed, he'd sat me down. "This house," he'd said, referring to the large family home my parents lived in, "it's a money pit. Your mother loves it for what it looks like, not what it is. She and your father. They're not good with money." He had then shown me a set of documents. He had set up a complex trust to manage the property. He had made me the sole trustee and the primary beneficiary, a secret he asked me to keep. "You're the only one who's got a lick of sense, even if they don't see it," he told me. "The trust. We'll pay the baseline mortgage, but the upkeep, the taxes. That's a burden. I've put you in charge. One day, you'll know what to do with it. Don't let them ruin you. For a decade, I had honored his wishes, but I had interpreted them through the lens of a hopeful daughter. I used my own income to pay the exorbitant property taxes every year. I paid for the new roof 2 summers ago, the new furnace last winter. I supplemented the mortgage whenever their lavish spending created a shortfall. I did it all silently, funneling the money through the trust so it seemed like the estate was simply taking care of itself. They lived in their grand house, hosting parties and projecting an image of effortless wealth, completely oblivious to the fact that their loser daughter was the one keeping the lights on. That was the moment the plan began to form. It wasn't about revenge in a fiery, dramatic sense. It was about balance. It was about creating a consequence so direct and unavoidable that the truth would be the only thing left standing when the dust settled. I called a lawyer, a sharp, no-nonsense woman recommended by a colleague. I laid out the entire story, the family dynamics, the financial records I'd meticulously kept, and the trust documents from my grandfather. She listened without judgment, her expression shifting from professional interest to a kind of grim satisfaction. "The documents are ironclad," she said, tapping a perfectly manicured finger on my grandfather's signature. "You are in complete control of the asset. You have been more than generous. You owe them nothing more. The question is, what do you want to do?" I looked out her high-rise window at the city below. "I want to correct the record," I said, my voice steady. "I want them to understand the reality of their situation. I don't want to yell or scream. I just want to show them the bill." We spent the next few weeks preparing. We drafted official notices. We collated every receipt, every bank transfer, every property tax payment I had ever made. We prepared a full, detailed accounting of the last 10 years. The process was methodical, emotionless. With every document I signed, I felt a layer of the old, painful hope sloughing away, leaving behind something stronger and more resilient. I was no longer a daughter seeking approval. I was a strategist executing a plan. I was taking control of the narrative, and I would deliver the final chapter in person. The call came, as I knew it would, about 3 months after the reunion. It was my brother, David, his voice tight with a panic he was failing to conceal behind a layer of bluster. "What did you do?" he demanded, without even a hello. "We got a letter. A notice of delinquency from the county. The bank is talking about foreclosure. Mom is beside herself. This is because of your little tantrum, isn't it? You need to come home and fix this. Now." I listened calmly. "I'll be there on Sunday," I said, my voice even. "We can have a family meeting." I could hear the relief in his sigh. He thought I had caved. He thought the loser was coming home to clean up another mess. He had no idea I was the one who had set the fire. I arrived at the house on Sunday afternoon. I wore a tailored blazer and slacks, my work uniform, a quiet armor. They were all assembled in the formal dining room, the site of so many tense family meals. My mother sat at the head of the table, her face a mask of tragic grievance. My father sat beside her, looking gray and diminished. David and Sarah flanked them, a united front of accusation. The air was thick with it. My mother began before I had even fully sat down. "I have never, in my life, been so disappointed," she started, her voice trembling with manufactured sorrow. "To think that my own child would be so selfish, so cruel. To hold a grudge over one silly little comment. Your father and I could lose our home. This beautiful home, everything we've worked for, all because you can't take a joke." She went on. A long, winding monologue of self-pity and blame. I let her speak. I let David add his piece about responsibility and family duty. I let Sarah murmur her agreement. I watched them, not as a daughter, but as an observer studying a foreign species. When they were finally done, the silence fell again, this time expectant. They were waiting for my apology, for my promise to make it all go away. I didn't say a word. Instead, I reached into my leather portfolio and pulled out a thick, spiral-bound folder. I placed it in the center of the polished mahogany table with a soft, definitive thud. "You're right, Mom," I said, my voice quiet but carrying in the stillness. "One of your children is a loser. A financial loser who has been living far beyond their means for over a decade." I opened the folder. "This," I said, turning it to face them, "is the bill." Page by page, I walked them through it. The first page was the property tax record for the last 10 years, with every payment highlighted and traced directly from my business account. My father flinched. The next pages were the receipts for the new roof, the emergency plumbing work, the furnace replacement. All paid by me. Sarah's jaw tightened. Then came the bank statements, showing the supplemental mortgage payments I had made, dozens of them over the years, disguised as transfers from the trust. David's face went from smug to confused. Finally, I slid the original trust documents across the table. Grandpa was a smart man, I said, looking directly at my mother. He knew you saw this house as a status symbol, not a responsibility. He put it in a trust, and he made me the trustee. For 10 years, I have honored what I thought was his wish, to keep you comfortable. I have poured over $200,000 of my loser income into this house to maintain the illusion of your success. The color drained from my mother's face. She looked at my father, who refused to meet her gaze. He knew. He had known all along and had let me carry the burden while he enjoyed the peace. So you see, I continued, my voice remaining calm and level while their world was visibly tilting on its axis. You're not in danger of the bank foreclosing. The bank has no claim here. You're in danger of being evicted by me. My mother finally found her voice, a strangled gasp. You can't. This is our home. I looked at her, and for the first time, I felt nothing. No anger, no pain, just a vast, quiet emptiness where my love for her used to be. It stopped being your home when you decided the person holding it up was worthy of your contempt, I said, standing up and straightening my jacket. This isn't revenge. This is a business decision. I am liquidating a poorly performing asset. The house has been sold. You have 60 days to vacate the premises. The aftermath was not a single, explosive event, but a slow, messy collapse. For the first few weeks, I was bombarded with frantic, then pleading, then abusive calls and texts. I blocked their numbers. My lawyer handled all communication, a sterile and impassable wall against their emotional onslaught. From what I pieced together later from a sympathetic aunt, the fallout within the family was brutal. The carefully constructed facade of their perfect life had been obliterated, and they turned on each other like starving animals. My mother's rage, finding no purchase on me, was directed at my father. His decade of silent complicity was exposed, and he could no longer hide behind the pretense of being a capable patriarch. He was revealed as a weak man who had allowed his daughter to secretly shoulder his responsibilities so he could avoid his wife's disappointment. The golden children, David and Sarah, were suddenly faced with a problem their prestigious careers couldn't easily solve. They were forced to confront the reality that their parents were financially destitute and would soon be homeless. Their high-status, high-cost lifestyles didn't leave much room for suddenly supporting two dependent adults. The arguments were apparently spectacular. David blamed Sarah for not being more grateful. Sarah blamed David for not seeing the signs. They both blamed my father for his deceit and my mother for her arrogance, the very arrogance they had enabled their entire lives. They had to sell off most of my mother's prized antique furniture and expensive art to afford the deposit on a small, two-bedroom rental apartment in a town an hour away, far from the friends they had spent years trying to impress. Their social standing, the thing my mother valued above all else, evaporated overnight. I didn't revel in this. Hearing about it brought me no joy, only a distant, melancholy sense of inevitability. My action hadn't destroyed them, it had simply held up a mirror, and they had shattered themselves against their own reflection. As for me, the sale of the house was a profound liberation. The money, which was legally and morally mine, was a significant sum. I reinvested most of it into my business, hiring my first 2 employees and expanding my services. I used the rest to buy a small, light-filled condo for myself in a new city, a place with no memories attached. The peace I found there was more valuable than any inheritance. I started painting again, not for clients, but for myself. I filled my walls with my own colors, my own stories. I learned that my worth was never something they could bestow or withdraw. It was inherent. It was in my talent, my work ethic, my resilience. Their definition of success had been a gilded cage, and my mother's cruelty, ironically, had been the key that set me free. Sometimes, late at night, I think about that family reunion. I can still hear the echo of her voice, the word loser, hanging in the air. It no longer hurts. It's just a word from a stranger, a relic from a life that is no longer mine. I lost a family, yes, but in the wreckage, I found myself. And for the first time, I can honestly say I am proud of the person I've become. I didn't need their approval to succeed, I needed their rejection to become free.